wasn't a good start. Just picture all my, that happens with these guys. My lever's not. So here we are.
So here we are. Welcome, Alyssa.
Thank you so much.
This is welcome to Composer's Voice.
Composer's Voice.
Composer's Voice is the Composer's Voice, a TV show here on MNN. You have been a longtime collaborator of Vox Novus and Composer's Voice and 15 Minutes of Fame and other stuff along the way.
It's one of the great things. It's one of the great things happening in new music right now, in my personal opinion.
Thank you. But you're a veteran. So the last time you were at Composer's Voice, we were back at Jan Hus Church.
That's right. Long time ago.
I think at that time, was it a monthly concert series, or were we
I think it was.
Yeah.
It was at least monthly, and then sometimes there were extra concerts in between.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I loved the format that you had, because you had the 15 Minutes of Fame, but then you would have other things.
Right.
So it has. And I loved that you had so many different kinds of music. Like, it wasn't, so many new music groups or presenters. They have sort of their thing. And I felt the breadth of what you were supporting, and I thought that was great.
That's part of the point of Composer's Voice, to sort of show the breadth of what living composers are doing. There's a lot of different styles and techniques and genres and so forth, and just to feature one seemed very limited. So it was, so you never know what you're going to get, but
It's great.
I guarantee you'll be entertained.
Isn't that one of the wonderful things? Like, striving to learn how to go into the unknown.
Sure.
Not to figure that you're going to have it all figured out. Because this is actually the truth of life, right? We don't really know what's going to happen in the next moment, or the next breath even. But we think we do, and we think we can control it and set it all up. But really, it's great. And it's great to embrace the breadth of it, because that's our lives.
Yeah, and you never know what you're going to find. Hopefully you'll find something that you want to listen to again. With that said, why don't we catch people up a little bit?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about, where you started from and where you went to, and how'd you get here?
Well, as a composer, I started out playing the harp. And all I know about that is that I don't remember wanting to play the harp, but I remember starting very young, and I also remember that my mother tells me that from when I could talk, when I would hear the harp, I would say, I play that. Had fantastic early training as part of the Chicago Children's Choir, and I think that has everything to do with why I became a musician. This is great music, was a great director who had standards and was not mean, but really held everybody to a standard. And we sang with the Chicago Lyric Opera, and we sang with the symphony. I mean, we really, did some great music. And that I was still pretty young. And then, fast forward, in high school, I was with a sort of a very new age harpist composer guy named Joel Andrews. He was my teacher at that time, because we had moved from Chicago to California. And I remember saying to him that I wanted to write music, and he said, I don't know what a woman's music would sound like. And for some reason, this is totally on me, not on him, I took it to mean, I was a little daunted by that response. And I guess I had never at that time heard of other women composers. This is back before internet and before,
sure.
And I had never researched it or thought about it, and all the people that I knew of course, were all men, so I didn't really take it too seriously, but I did start studying privately when I was at Juilliard. I studied with Jacob Druckmann and Andrew Thomas, and I was very much part of the new music scene then, played with all these new music groups, all kinds of new music, and had all these pictures about what new music was and how to write and what to write. And I really didn't know anything about what it meant to study composition. I took all the classes that all the composers took
Right.
when I was there. I went to the forums and all that stuff. But it wasn't really until my late 30s that I found what I really wanted to pursue. I don't think I knew how to study anything. I don't think I really knew much about how to learn because I was very fast. I was very quick in school. And so I didn't have to really work at learning things.
Okay.
And so that turned out to be a handicap when I came up against things that didn't come right away.
Sure.
Now I feel differently and I see differently, and I'm glad to have learned that I didn't know how to learn. It's not something I can pass on to my students who are
Right.
super quick, and then they think they can't do something because it doesn't come right away. It's like, what are you talking about?
Just got practice.
Yeah, you have to learn, and you have to learn how to learn this thing, and
Right.
and not assume anything
Right.
about learning and what learning means and how to learn. And now there's so much that's known about how the brain works, and so many wonderful resources about how to learn. So then when I was in my late 30s, on a whim, I took a storytelling session with Laura Sims, who is a fantastic world-class storyteller. And we did The Frog Prince. And I took 5 sessions with her on that story for whatever reason. And it completely inspired me. And I realized all these things that I had loved, which is I had always loved stories. And I used to put on plays when I was a kid, little fairy tales and playing the harp and doing stories and composing. All of a sudden these things came together and I started doing settings of myths and fairy tales, using the harp and sometimes using other instruments as well and percussion. And I had a company, worked with a group of actors for about 14 years. We did a lot of performances all over the tri-state area. Took 5 shows to Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and it was wonderful. I totally loved it, and I felt like this is why I play the harp. This is why I wanted to study composing, and this brings this other thing that I have always loved. I never had the ambition to do theater or to be a storyteller, but I love the stories. I love the great classic stories, and I love the kinds of meanings that can be found in them. And so to find a way to present them that was honoring the ideas and honoring the meanings. And of course, they're wonderful, many of them are wonderful for all ages, and every age will get them on their own level. But it's just, I felt like, I just felt called to do it. I loved this. So
That's
there you
awesome.
go.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. That was awesome.
Thank you.
So, Alyssa, why don't you tell us a little bit about the lever harp?
Well, the lever harp is a great instrument. That's the first thing I have to say about it. It's a great instrument. It has possibilities that the pedal harp doesn't have, and it is used for all kinds of music. And one of the things I love about it is it has almost the same range as a pedal harp. It goes, you know, really pretty full range. You can get a really nice, rich bass. Really pretty. But it also has really very bright treble. You know, very clear, bright treble area. Okay, so what can I tell you about the lever harp? The lever harp has a range, goes down to this particular, the thing about lever harps that's very interesting is they're non-standard. Pedal harps are pretty standard one to another. They have about the same range, similar string tension, so on. Lever harps are very different one from another. They have, you know, can be anywhere from 21 strings to 36 or so strings. And all the way it works is that each string has a lever which can be raised or lowered, and it changes the pitch a half step, like that. Other than that, it's like basically, you would think of it as like the white notes of the piano, like a C major scale. Now, depending on how you tune the harp, you can get different keys. Like I tune this harp in 3 flats, so that I can get the first 3 flat keys, E flat, and I can also get the sharp keys. The tricky thing, of course, is getting from one to another, and that really depends on the piece. You know, they have a really nice, rich bass, this harp does. You know, it's not as loud as a pedal harp, but it's got real body to it, and up here it's quite clear and bright. So, you know, there's a nice polytonality. Let me see. So, the other thing that I did in the piece that I played as a demonstration piece is I used 3 different modes. Mm-hmm. So it was possible to get different tonalities simply by changing a mode, which is it's a nice little trick to use for this instrument.
Sure. What are some interesting things that you've come across that you've played?
Well, I have to say most of the stuff that I've done that has been challenging in terms of what this instrument can do have been things that I've written. So I wrote a whole setting of a Lenape creation myth that used really a pretty big range of tonalities and you know, a lot of lever changes.
Long ago, there was nothingness, endless quiet. The creator, Kishelmakunk, lived in this great, peaceful void. One day, Kishelmakunk had a vision of bright, shining stars, untold numbers of stars, filling the emptiness, swirling around him. The stars formed galaxies, worlds spinning in space. He saw one special star, our sun. Circling around that sun star were planets. He saw one special planet, the Earth.
I haven't really seen, I mean, there are wonderful arrangements by a lot of people that are very traditional. You know, a tremendous amount of wonderful Celtic music, tremendous amount of sort of English country dance music that people have done settings of and so on. But in terms of the way that I've been interested in expanding the harmonic possibilities of the instrument, at this point I don't know of anyone else who's been doing what I've been doing. There may be, and I just don't know them. It's quite possible, you know, quite possible.
And for us non-harpists / composers who've worked at harps, what are some of the traditional things that people do?
Well, one thing that's really different for the harp than the piano, which is what people don't realize, is that with the harp, it's like having two left hands, both the wide spaces at the top. So, and the other thing is that the stretch on the harp is much bigger than on the piano. So for me to do, I can do an octave between my second and my fourth. You know, big chords, especially if there's a wide spacing on top, but that's completely standard thing to do. Another thing is that because the hands are opposite, the bispigliando, what we call that kind of feathery effect, is quite possible. And you can do, let's say you're doing 5 notes, you can then add and bring out 1 note above, or I suppose you can do below. Very wonderful harpistic effect. Of course, glisses are the standard thing. Now, on the pedal harp, you can, by changing the pedals, you can get totally different chords at the blink of an eye. With this one, you can't really do that. But the possibilities of doing a very interesting, differently sourced, pitched, gliss, of course, is there. And I also have often found myself, I mean, when I write for harp, I write usually away from the harp, because I write at the piano, even though I really don't play the piano, because I don't want to be just going into what the fingers want to do. But then when I try it on the harp, whatever I've written, I will often make modifications, because it's like, this is unnecessarily awkward. Something's unnecessarily awkward. I'll modify it in such a way so that it's not going to be just like so hard to play. And so there's a certain balance that you can find between what is idiomatic for an instrument and what is also letting yourself live a little,
right.
Or live a lot, So that's how I feel about it.
Wow, that's wonderful. Tell me a little bit about Oh Freedom.
Oh Freedom. Well, Oh Freedom happened to be one of the spirituals that we sang when I was in this children's choir. Okay. And so I loved it from, when I was 10 years old. And it was, it was actually one of the first pieces I ever did. My husband is a fantastic horn player, and he played with a group called the Eastern Brass. They toured, and they were doing an album. And it was American themed album. And they had come up short against the number of pieces they needed for the album. So I did a set of arrangements called American Songs, which was a setting of O Shenandoah and O Susanna and a couple of, and as a medley, four different songs. And it was very conservative, style, but contemporary-ish. It was really very, very standard kind of arranging. But that arrangement turned out to be a tremendous hit on their tours. You know, extremely successful. So they commissioned me to write another piece. So I did this setting of O Freedom. It was one thing to do 4 short settings.
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing to have a long thing on one piece. Different skills are required. and so some of it I really liked, and some of it just didn't quite work. Sometimes you just have to let something go, and it's done, and maybe it's not perfect, but never mind. And sometimes that isn't how you feel. Sometimes you want to go back to it, and I really wanted to go back to it. So early, I guess it was during the pandemic, I went back to it and decided, or somewhere around there, early, not maybe 2019 or so, I wanted to redo it. And so I really redid it as a set of 7 very different variations with a little intro. And I just felt like, exploring the idea of what freedom is something that I've always cared about. And maybe that's why I was so attracted to that, spiritual. Because I remember someone saying to me about, speaking of that word responsibility, there's the freedom of the responsibility. Having a responsibility gives you a certain freedom, gives you freedom to get out of your own stupid stuff. That freedom is, there's so many aspects to what freedom can mean. There's freedom from the talking in your head. There's freedom from feeling something has to be done a certain way. There's freedom from feeling like there's no boundaries. Like to actually have a form gives freedom. There's just so many aspects to it. And so I felt like I wanted to just explore a range of musical ideas that might evoke different feelings of freedom.
Right.
So that's where that piece came from, and I'm very happy with it now.
Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord.